The Nuts and Bolts of Writing, Season 2, a podcast where we talk about literature, the ins and outs of writing, and how to actually start writing. Hi everyone, today it's just me, your host, Fortunus Games. Today I'm going to be reviewing a book by one of my favorite authors, Orhan Pamuk, his work Silent House. Written in 1983, Silent House is Pamuk's second novel. It tells the story of three siblings: Faruk, a historian; Nilgun, a sociology student who sympathizes with leftists; and Metin, a high school nerd, visiting their grandmother Fatma in a small town near Istanbul. One of their relatives, Hassan, who is their father's half-brother's nephew, has been sucked into right-wing gangs, and he eventually causes a tragic event due to his naivety, which we'll discuss later in this podcast. Note, there will be spoilers in this podcast. Overall, I didn't like this book very much. I wanted to enjoy it since I've enjoyed many other works by Pamuk, including My Name is Red and The Museum of Innocence. The main reason is because there's too many narrators and characters. The book has 32 chapters, and each chapter is narrated from a different character's point of view in first person. This can be quite confusing, especially when the cast is so large, and some of the characters are one notes and never truly fleshed out. One of these characters is Nilgun, who we never really get to feel for since we don't have a grasp of who she is. As such, when she gets injured and dies at the end, we don't feel the full impact of her death. Hassan could have been better fleshed out as well. A high school dropout with a crippled father, Hassan is frustrated with life and wonders if he can actually get a good job after finishing his high school education. He feels trapped by the hierarchy of his society and wants to go to Istanbul to make something of himself. But instead, he drops out of high school and gets sucked into joining a right-wing nationalist gang. His father sells lottery tickets for a living and is the illegitimate son of Dr. Selahattin Bey, the late husband of the grandmother of the story, Fatma. An atheist, Dr. Selahattin was obsessed with progress and dedicated his life to working on a large encyclopedia that he claimed would enlighten Turkey and the rest of the so-called East. Hassan eventually falls in love with his relative, Nilgun, who often played with him when they were children. Hassan's father's brother is Recep, a dwarf who takes care of the bedridden Fatma, who is constantly thinking about the past and bitter about Dr. Selahattin's behavior years after his passing. Hassan, like Fatma, questions modernity. He doesn't like how Faruk, Nilgun, and Metin don't take religion seriously, and envies their middle-class lifestyle. Eventually, he discovers that Nilgun reads the leftist paper. Once his right-wing friends discover he's in love with Nilgun and that she's a leftist sympathizer, they plan to do something bad to her to punish him for loving her. Terrified, Hassan plans to tell Nilgun that his friends are plotting something against her. However, Nilgun doesn't listen to him, and they start arguing. Eventually, she calls him a fascist, since she realizes he's part of the right-wing gang, and he gets mad. This leads him to beat her and run away. Bruised and terrified, Nilgun is picked up by Recep, who takes her home to rest. Unfortunately, her condition gets worse, and she eventually dies from cerebral hemorrhage. These events happen too fast, and Hassan's feelings about his place in society aren't fleshed out that well. He comes across as whiny when his father asks him why he isn't studying, and his feelings about Nilgun are vague as well. We know he thinks she's beautiful and that she was nice to him as a kid, but are there any other reasons why he's so in love with her? The story is also somewhat bloated. If we had fewer viewpoints and more time was spent out fleshing out Nilgun and Hassan, I think this would have been much stronger. There was too much time spent on Fatma's stream of consciousness, especially on her flashbacks about her husband and how frustrated she was with him. After the first few chapters from Fatma's point of view, her chapters became incredibly repetitive. I also didn't enjoy Faruk and Metin's points of view. Faruk's chapters were meandering and didn't contribute to the overall plot. It was just about him thinking about why he chose to be a historian. It was too dreamlike and repetitive, especially when he listed details from true stories from the past. Metin was also boring to read, since his chapters were just about his crush and how he tries to connect with friends who smoke, drink, and drive fancy cars. Overall, a confusing read. Some of the prose was very well written, since this is Pamuk we are talking about, but it wasn't enjoyable, especially after the first 50 or so pages. At the beginning, the setting and Fatma's stream of consciousness had a lot of potential, but the amount of detail, pointless characters and chapters, and lack of fleshed out characters really bogged down the narrative. I give this book 2 out of 5 stars.